Hello, everybody, and welcome to our second webinar today on oil services and why they are more important than they've ever been before, what's really happening with the cars, what things that you're going to see come up, and why this is all kind of happening. So the first thing I wanted to talk about today was what's changed in cars over the last 20 or 30 years. They've changed more than they ever have, obviously, between emission systems and everything else that's going on. But the big one is back in 1975, the CAFE Act was passed by Congress. And what that requires is that every year on the vehicle, the car has to be more efficient and or lighter, or the gas engine has to be more efficient. And they're really running out of ways to make the motors more efficient, and they're trying to make everything on the cars lighter. One thing that you might have noticed if you've been doing this for a while is that, an old brake caliper had a lot of iron in it. They weighed 5 or 10 pounds, and the calipers nowadays are alloys. They're very light, right? This is one of the things the manufacturers are doing to try to lighten the cars because they're required to do that every year. Batteries are another great example of this. If you've noticed that a lot of batteries are smaller now, or they only last about 3 years instead of 10 years, it's because they have to make everything lighter on the vehicle to meet those emission standards. Another thing that happened was every internal engine component became lighter. The piston rings, the thing that pushes the pressure out onto the piston to control the compression and control the oil in the cylinder, have become not as strong as they were before, just like everything else. An older piston ring was about 21.5 pounds of pressure. A modern one nowadays, especially like in a newer GDI engine, is about 14 pounds. So what's happening is they don't push as hard as they used to. They get clogged up more than they used to. Looking at this picture on the right, if you see the ring that kind of has the squiggly, that's the area that controls the oil. So oil has to pass through those passages to go back into the system and do its job. If those holes get clogged up, that becomes a big problem. Now, like I said, the outside pressure that's getting pushed on this is not there anymore, okay? So it's just something that you should know. Being a service advisor, the CAFE Act has made all of our lives more difficult. It's making a lot more pressure on and heat on fluids than it ever has before, because when the weight of that is not there, it just can't handle it like it used to. So it ends up wearing out the fluids a lot faster. That's why you're seeing an increase in a lot of the price on the fluids from the dealership, like OEM fluids. I've seen quarts of differential fluid that was almost $90 before, because they're just trying to do so much with that little bit of fluid. So what does your customer want, right? Now think about this. They bought a car, they made a huge investment on a vehicle, and what do they want from you, right? They want to get from you what makes sense and what'll get them to their next service. I think it's a huge misconception that people don't want to take care of their cars. Most of them do. We are just very unclear about how we do that and how we explain it to them, right? So one of the questions that I hope you learn and start using is, what is the plan for this vehicle? When your customer comes in, ask them that, right? They will tell you, oh, my daughter's using it while she goes to college, and then we're going to get rid of it. Okay, great. Look, I'm going to look at everything on the car today, and we'll base our recommendations on your plan for the car. But something that can wait, I get it. Let me know, and we can make a decision on the phone then. Sound good, right? So let them tell you what the vehicle's for. A lot of them are going to tell you, I want to keep it till the wheels fall off. Then when you call them and try to explain a service to them that they might not think is necessary, you can say, hey, look, I understand that you might feel that way, but in my experience of doing this every day, these services make the cars last 150,000 miles or more if you do the things that I'm asking you to do. And that's what I'm recommending for you to do on this vehicle, because you told me you want to keep it till the wheels fall off. These services are going to be a lot less money than buying a new vehicle. So taking care of the one you have is always going to be cheaper. Okay, they want you to be honest and set a proper expectation. We have a really bad habit in this industry of selling ourselves short. We make appointments and saying, oh, it'll be done in an hour, and it takes an hour and 15 minutes. And people have lives too, right? They need to get in and out like everybody else. So figuring out a way to do this properly, one way that I like to do it is build value into the service of not just changing the oil, but doing a full inspection, making sure that your car is going to last the next 6 months until we see you again. We need to check certain items to make sure that that happens. That doesn't happen in an hour. That's why we need it for an hour and a half to 2 hours. The customer that you want is going to want those things. Lastly, make it convenient. The people that are getting to the point now that people can make appointments on their website and schedule times that I've been talking to you are going to do very well because it's convenient to the customer, right? You want to make it easy to buy. When you make it easy to buy, you don't have to sell them. They'll make the decision on their own. Your job is to really lay out the reasons why this would be a good thing for them and then let them decide because it's their vehicle, right? So customer comes in and most of them have no idea what it takes to maintain a vehicle, and most of the stuff out there is not helping them. They're looking for a plan. They're looking for someone to say, I have experience with these cars. This is what I would recommend we do on this vehicle, and here's why. And be able to back it up and maybe show proof that this stuff works, right? Or guarantee them that it's going to work. So they want to come and they want to see a plan. We used to do 3,000-mile oil changes. A lot of people would go 4. We didn't have a lot of issues back then. Then all of a sudden we went to 6,000-mile oil changes, 10,000-mile oil changes. And one of the problems with this is that we didn't increase the oil capacity. We really didn't change the oil. And all of a sudden we went on longer distances. The reason for this is that all the dealerships started getting in competition for maintenance costs, and they all wanted to have the cheapest maintenance cost that was advertised. So they did this to extend the oil changes to get it covered. But you'll look in an owner's manual and you'll see it say that you can go 1,000 or up to a quart of oil burn per 1,000 miles. How can you go 6,000 miles in a car that holds 4 quarts? Right? It doesn't make any sense. So you've got to be smart enough to kind of figure this stuff out and recommend to your customer what they want, what you would want on your own vehicle, right? So most times there's no recommendations on any fluids in owner's manuals anymore. Some are coming back. It just says inspect, 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 right? So how are you going to inspect it? Because we all know that if you don't change certain fluids, that component's going to go bad at one point, right? So the owner's manual is also written for every vehicle from Arizona to Maine to Canada to Mexico to Florida, and it's all the same driving condition. Most people are in severe driving condition, right? But we don't look at it that way. We look at it as it's the same thing for every vehicle, and that's just not true. Some places replace cabin air filters every visit because it's very dusty in that area, right? Think about this stuff about what you want to recommend, okay, as you build this out today. Also, a lot of times there's no services listed for wear items. So are you measuring things and telling customers so that they can expect a big bill, right? I would love that. My wife would love to be able to budget for car repair and say, oh, hey, your brakes are gonna be due next time. It's gonna be this much money because we measured it today and we were able to tell you from our experience, you have roughly 6 months left on your brakes, right? So what is your plan that you wanna share with the customer? Okay, so as you start looking this and breaking it out, what you want to look at is your minimum visit. Now, this is the thing that every customer you have is going to come to you for the most times. And then every once in a while, you'll have the bigger ones, right? So what is something that you need to do to make sure that that car is going to make it 6 months, right? And then we're going to check all those things and we'll recommend stuff if we see it. And then we do it again the next 5,000. Then we do it again the next 5,000. Sometimes we don't check everything on stuff like this, right? If it's got 30,000 miles on it and we're doing a 5,000 mile service, we're probably not pulling a spark plug. Right? We're not going to check everything, but we know with, from our prior experience and education that we can build these things out and kind of predict what to expect or at least what to check for at those times. So as we build it out, it just starts, every 5,000 miles, we're going to see them. Then we start looking at things that we only look at once a year. Right? Because if we just sold a car 6 months ago, there might not be an item that we need to check again. Right? So is it air filters, right? Air filters is common. Could be that, okay? Fuel services, things like that. So 30,000 miles, you would have a different items that you would look at on a vehicle, right? At 50, there might be something that you would recommend that you wouldn't recommend at 30. At 100, right? There might buy 100,000, we need to get this stuff done. That's our rule, right? But you're not going to look at those items at 22,000 miles, okay? So the idea here is to build out a plan that you can recommend and say, hey, in our experience, this is what we recommend and this is why. If you really want to get your car to 150,000 miles or more, these are the items that we need to talk about doing, right? A lot of people know that you're going to replace the cabin filter every year. This is why a lot of cars have services that just include it as a 1-year service, because by the time they pull it out, they know that it's dirty and gross, right? Also, when I used to do my service, I always used Frigifresh because the customer noticed the way the car smelled when they picked it up. What this is a disinfectant that you spray into the HVAC system while it's running. It sanitizes the case, and then the customer will notice the difference in the way the car drives instead of just changing the filter and they don't notice a difference, okay? So as we build these things out, and as you do this with your team, and again, this will be recorded and I will send you all a copy. So you want to think about what you need to check to get the car to 6 months. That's really your goal. If it won't make it 6 months, then that component has to be fixed, right? That's why 2 30-second brakes need to get done today, because we're not going to make it back to our next visit, right? They're going to have a breakdown. So the things that we're going to do an oil and a filter service. I always include a tire rotation. 1, it gives you the ability to have a little bit higher price on your oil change. 2, every tire needs to be rotated at 5,000 miles. So just get used to doing it on every vehicle and then build it into your package. You don't need to sell it, right? You can build it into your package. Battery test and charging test, okay? There's really quick ones out there. If you have ones that aren't and you're looking for one, let me know. I can send you what I usually get, but test every battery. When I went into one shop, they were doing 30 to 40 tow-ins a month. Once we got battery testers, it went down to about 3 because we were testing them. And if it says low, it's probably not going to make it 6 months. So we're going to recommend it today, right? We're testing, we're not guessing. Fill and inspect your tires, right? And then the tire one's important because if they're low, you need to check it for a leak, right? If they're all low, you're good. But if one's low, you need to check it for a leak. This will make you look like a rock star with your customer when you call them and tell them you found a leak that they forgot to tell you about, okay? Topping off fluids, okay? This is kind of a mistake that a lot of people do in marketing. We don't want to top off fluids, okay? These are sealed systems. If coolant is low, we need to check it for a leak, not top it off. The only thing that you should be topping off is washer fluid. This is because a long time ago, we used to have continuous oil systems that would just drop the extra oil on the ground. And that is what created this whole top off thing, right? So we don't do that anymore. If it's consuming something or it's leaking, then you need to make sure that you're doing a check to find out why. Next, go ahead and check and test your fluids and have a way to do that. If it's something you're interested in, just please let us know. We can show you a few ways, or I can recommend a few ways that I've done it in the past. Checking your air filter, checking your cabin filter. Now, one way to save some money on the cabin, okay, is instead of pulling it on every car. Now, look, if you pull it on every car, you're going to sell more of them. I guarantee it. But if it's killing you, you can recommend it with the engine air filter. If that's dirty, usually they go bad around the same amount of miles. You can recommend them as a package. And I think it kind of works better than trying to sell them individually. Just a recommendation. We're going to check safety and check over the lights, right? We don't want a customer to leave and the battery die in the week. We don't want the customer to leave and get pulled over because they have a taillight out, right? These are the items that we need to check. A lot of people do this, but every tech does it different because we don't have a system to make sure that everything's actually getting done. We need to measure items, right? We need to measure brake pads. We need to measure tires and all that kind of stuff, all right? Every 15, cabin air and engine air filter. If you know in your area, they pretty much are nasty every 15,000 miles, then if you just did it 15,000 miles ago, you know that it's probably going to need it again. There are shops out there that look at the tickets the day before and see what they would be due for, so they can kind of give the team a heads up on what the car could need, right? It was just here 5,000 miles ago. We recommended these 3 things, right? That saves them a lot of time. Fuel service, right? With GDI engines, fuel services are becoming a 15,000 mile interval because of ethanol and carbon buildup, and it's nasty. If you don't keep up with it, it's going to cause a problem. A lot of times people will tie a road test in to a 1-year service if they don't do it with the oil change to add some value, do more of a safety check, and make sure everything's good. Sometimes they'll call it a deeper inspection. Sometimes they'll say that it's going to go to a mechanic versus the oil change guy because we want to look everything over at least once a year, right? Another way to explain this is in most owners' manuals, it does have an annual service. So a lot of the shops that do this will recommend on the phone, have you had your annual service? If you haven't, this is what it is, and this is where we would recommend to start with your vehicle instead of doing just the basic oil service today, okay? Then, you know, at 30K, we write it out that we're going to check for trans services and coolant and brake services, all-wheel drive services, fuel services, and power steering, right? If the guys know that this stuff was just done, they don't need to check it, right? Save your time, okay? So that's how this helps you when you kind of build it. And then maybe every 60, we're doing spark plugs, right? Maybe we're doing a timing belt at a certain interval, right? So again, with a lot of unknown customers, the 1-year service should be really what you're trying to sell them on your first visit. If you can do this on the phone, you will become very good at attracting the right customers because you're already explaining to them what they're going to do. They're saying yes, they're interested in taking care of their vehicle, and that's the customer that you want. Diff services. So Honda actually sells more differential fluid services than any manufacturer out there. The reason is because on the dash, there's a little thing that pops up and says A6. A6 is a differential service on a Honda Odyssey. Those get done because the customer sees the thing pop up and says, oh, hey, right? We have to kind of build the same service in our own facility on what we're going to recommend when, and then get everybody on the same page. It makes us look very professional and very strong, okay? So as you're building out these services, I wanted to kind of tell you a quick story about how to do this and think about this. So we noticed that Honda Odysseys, if they waited till over 100,000 miles to get their spark plugs replaced, it would end up setting a check engine light and then also needing a fuel service and ignition coils to fix it, okay? And we realized pretty quick that if we recommended it at 85,000, and even if they wait to do it at 90, well, then all we're going to have to do is the spark plugs in the fuel service, and we're not going to have to do that, and we can save them a lot of money. And that's what your customer wants from you, okay? Think about if you were the customer, which one would you want? Would you want the bill with the check engine light and all the coils, or do you want the fuel service and the tune-up done a little bit sooner? Because what happens is the spark plugs wear out, they become harder to work, so the coils have to work harder, and it shorts them out, right? If the new power plug goes in sooner, it fixes that problem. This is the stuff that your customer wants. They want you to have the experience and be able to explain these items and say, look, I'm doing this to save you money. I don't want you to have a bigger issue down the road because this is what we see on these vehicles. So you're going to do more oil services than anything in the world, right? Some shops literally have one manager that just deals with that all day and lets the other one kind of deal with all the bigger service, because it's definitely a different business. It's a different skill. It's a different approach than, oh, my car got there on a tow truck and it's broken down, fix it, right? So find a way to love them and find a way to make them easy. If it's you'd rather just do 3 in the morning, get them done and no more for the rest of the day, some people do that. Some people dedicate one bay, which is what I would recommend, and do one every 2 hours. If you can do 5 to 6 oil changes with inspections, that could really change a business, because if you're recommending things that are needed on a vehicle, because statistically it's going to need something, you're going to sell roughly 1 out of 3, and then that's going to turn it into a whole new business, because you're going to be making money off of your oil change bay versus just breakdowns and, oh, I got to get my oil changed, let me come in at the last minute. Okay. So you've got to find a way to make it easy for the customer and easy for you. If 8 a day is unreasonable, don't kill yourself, do 4. Figure out a way to love it and make it work. Okay. Now, when they come in for that, you need to remember the stuff that you're going to go over and explain this stuff to them. Okay. Then show them the inspection. Nobody does a good job of this at the counter, in my opinion. If you use a digital system, make the perfect one with a lot of pictures and make it really good and print it out and laminate it and put it at your counter. When they come in, show it to them. Get them excited about it. Get them to understand what you're trying to do. I'm trying to make sure your car's safe. These are the items that we check. These are the things that I'm going to share with you, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Okay. Tell them about your process. They want to know. All they do is drop off keys and pay. They don't know how great you are because you don't tell them, right? Tell them what you're checking. And a lot of times when this happens, they're going to tell you, oh, can you look at this too? Oh, can you look at this too? And every time that bring that up, they're trusting you more and they're willing to spend more money with you. People want to keep their cars and they want to take care of them, but we have to be able to recommend it in a way that they understand. Okay, recommend what you believe in. I'm a big believer in do the service to your own vehicle. If you'd like to do that, let me know. We'll set that up. Because if you believe in it and you notice a difference, then you can tell the customer, hey, look, I did it to my car and this really, really was a big difference for me. You're going to notice a difference. It's really a great thing, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Okay. So what should be done during oil service? What is going to get that car to the next 6,000 miles without an issue, without an oil consumption issue, without a problem, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Okay. So give you a little bit of oil knowledge real quick. So oil comes over on the boat, right? Or it comes from somewhere else. Most of the oil in the United States that you're going to see in gas are all going to be distilled here. They're not distilled there. So it gets distilled here. What's that? These big towers. Okay, great. They heat the stuff up, right? When it separates, you get all of your petroleum products from airline fuel to kerosene to diesel to gasoline to carpet to glue, everything from top to bottom as it separates out. This is one of the reasons that as gas goes up and down, everything else goes up and down because they're all made from the same distilling process, okay? When you start with an oil for an engine oil or something like that, you're going to start with a base stock. Most base stock is going to be the same across all the oils that you buy. I do recommending you buy an SN API. If you have questions about oil or something, let me know. I can help point you in the right direction. But the base stock is what gets added, items added to it to make the fluid for what you want to use it for, okay? Whether it's dyes or a lot of additive, okay? So engine oil and transmission fluid is very similar, but transmission fluid has a whole lot more detergent in it and it's dyed red, so that you can see it. And then the idea is as it goes dark, it tells you kind of when to change it. You know, the fluid's really built up, okay? So depending on what items you add, it gives you the items that, or the properties that you need to be able to handle the situation that you want, okay? Now, with engine oil, it's gonna get some heat in it. When you get heat in it, acid starts to form. Acid is what creates sludge and has a lot of the other issues, okay? One of the reasons for this is because a lot of fuel leaks past those piston rings and cause issues, and that makes the oil evaporate and get burned off, and that's why you're losing oil, okay? When this happens, okay, most of the wear happens during startup. Now, the most of the wear happens in the last 1,000 miles of the oil change because the viscosity wears out and it's not the same thickness over at the end of that, right? And it's dirty and all the additives are worn out. The base stock's still there, but there's no additives to help it do its job at that point, okay? So when it's in an engine, as you use it, it's going to get dirty, right? It's going to get dirty, it's going to have buildup, and that's what goes into this. You get sludge, you get bits, you get varnish, and all that discoloration, right? The timing chains on a car, et cetera, et cetera. So there's really 3 ways to fix this. Change it more often. So if you want to change your oil 2,000 miles, every 2,000 miles, that'll probably be good, right? You'll probably be able to do that, and it's not going to have a lot of these issues because you're changing it so much more frequently. The second one is more oil. Building an oil capacitor onto the side that can make it a 16-quart system over 6,000 miles would be a much better option than 4 quarts over 6,000 miles. And then the last option is to have more additive in that oil so that it can handle these things and get to 6,000 miles, okay? So the first thing that you want to do is get that dirty stuff out. So EPR, I always tell everyone red can, think of red oil light, right? So gas and diesel engines and hybrids and stop starts, you pour this in the oil before you change it. And you run the engine at 1,200 RPMs to 10 to 20 minutes, okay? It'll clean all that stuff off, get into all those tiny oil passages. The biggest difference with what we do compared to a lot of other people is that we work on dissolving particles, not releasing. That way it won't clog things up as it does it. It dissolves the stuff away so that when you change the oil, it comes out. Then you're going to change the oil and replace the filter. Okay. So here's an oil pan that did not use EPR, and here's an oil pan that did use EPR. You can see all the varnish cleaned off. Okay. You will usually see a 10 to 20 PSI increase in compression when you do this service. The customer will notice the difference, and here's why. Okay. If you notice the piston rings we had before, right? These are the first one is the little one where the oil passages are. You can barely see them, they're so tiny, okay? That is the part where the compression ring does not cover, and those can get clogged up too, which prevent it from doing its job, okay? Now look on the one on the right. You'll see how clean the passages are. These holes are so tiny now that when they get clogged up, you lose compression, you consume oil, you have issues, right? Every car out there is like this now because they're all going 6,000 miles. So this is a reason that you need to do this. These 5 and 10,000 mile oil changes need to have an oil deep clean before you're changing the oil to get it all out and make sure you're not having VVT issues and all this other stuff. Okay, so with oil, again, like we said, you get a base stock, and then you're going to have friction modifiers and detergents, and then you're going to have the additives. And the additives are going to be the most expensive part, okay? In a quart of oil, usually there's about a cap worth of the additives, the good stuff, if you will, okay? Using BGMOA, it increases the amount of additive by 300%. That's what we're doing with MOA. It helps with a lot of friction. It'll polish bearings if there's issues or rubbing, and it gets that oil to 6,000 miles, 10,000 miles, no problem. Okay. The reason I recommend 6,000 is because most filters are only rated for 6,000 miles. Okay. If you want to go 10, you need to get a really premium filter, and I would still check the oil level. Okay. We also have one that's designed for hybrids and stop-start engines. It is formulated a little bit differently. It's designed for engines that don't run consistently and they build up more deposits. So it's a different kind of deposit control that works more with condensation. And then also we have a diesel oil conditioner that's some really awesome stuff. The biggest thing with this is that it has soot control in it. So that's usually the biggest issue with diesels. Using this stuff on your diesel, you will definitely notice a difference. Like I said, remember that with 10,000 mile or 5,000 mile oil changes, you've got to use something or it's going to consume oil. So with fuel additives, I like to add a fuel additive into my annual oil change. We're going to do more about fuel, but just real quick, the gas is the 44K, the hybrid is for stop-start engines. Both of these are a 15,000 mile interval. So think about that. Think about how many tanks of gas somebody goes through in a year in 15,000 miles. This stuff is so strong, you only got to use it once a year, every 15,000 miles. And it's not just an injector cleaner, it cleans the entire fuel system. PD15 is the new diesel injector cleaner that is fantastic. Really, really excited about this stuff. It's a 10,000 mile interval, but again, you're not going to have an issue. All of these products are professional use only because they're so strong, and we don't sell them to the general public. We don't sell them at parts stores. If you don't think that your customers buy fuel additives, go look at a parts store. They sell tons of them, right? In a lot of cases, all you have to do is ask, right? Have you used a fuel cleaner this year? Oh, no, I haven't. Well, look, we have the best one on the market. It's super strong. It does a great job, and you'll notice a difference in the way the car runs afterwards, right? How great is that? So this is going to go in the tank during the service. It's strong enough to clean out the catalytic converter and oxygen sensors and upper end of the engine, which is a part of the oil consumption issue also. So this is something that's a part of that. If it's consuming oil, again, put 44K in the tank. It's going to help with the top side of the piston because the EPR is going to do the bottom side of the piston, okay? Again, I like to build this into my annual service. This is the stuff that your customer wants because they don't want to have issues. And if they use this annually, they're not going to have a huge bill down the road, right? So this is the stuff that you want to build into what you recommend and say, look, this is what we recommend every year. And here's why, right? We don't want you to have an issue down the road. And this stuff really does its job. It'll pay for itself in fuel saving. I've used this line a lot. You will see a gas mileage increase, not as big of one as you will with a real fuel service, like a whole fuel service, but they will see a gas increase if they're really tracking it. But I will tell people, look, this will pay for itself in gas mileage alone. Also, customer feels that the car runs better, right? So that's a big one. Hey, your car is actually going to run better. It's not I'm just taking your money and saying, get out, have a nice day. It's actually going to run better. You're going to feel it perform better. So let's just go over this real quick. So the first thing you want to do during an oil service is, because we're using less oil now and we're going longer mileages, is clean it. Get all that old debris out of there. VVT solenoids, you can see how tiny these holes are and how easily they get clogged up. This is one of the main reasons you're having to replace them so often, is because of that. So use a EPR cleaner to get that taken care of before you change the oil, right? There's a before and after of a valve cover. There's the before and after of an oil filter canister, okay? Now, on an oil change, so we've got our oil, right? And then we have either one of the MOAs or the DOC if it's diesel. This will give you no issues with being able to go 6,000 miles. The thing I like about this, and as a shop owner or a service manager, the last thing you want to deal with is a customer's engine going bad. If you use MOA on every car, that's not going to happen. The Maryland police used MOA and they went from losing 7 to 10 engines a year to 0. So it's one of those things that I build into all my oil change packages. It's the one that I try to get customers to buy the most because I know that they want it. It's just not always something I can explain, and I build it into my package and they get it and they understand, they feel their car run better and they trust me to make that decision for them in the future, right? Because I'm making a good decision for them. Remember that it triples the additive package. So anything that you have any issues with, put the MOA in it. It's because it has so much additive in it, it's going to help. Also, it counteracts oil loss and consumption. So again, if they are losing oil, this is something that you should talk to them about. With our diesel fuel system cleaner in 44K, again, it's an annual strength cleaner. 15,000 miles. It cleans the top end of the engine, and also it increases their per mile gallon. Whether it's gas, on diesel, you're probably going to see a much bigger torque increase than you will miles per gallon. But when that happens, you put your foot down a little bit more often, and then your gas mileage goes down. So just kind of a heads up on that one. We do have protection plans that go along with these products. If you have questions, feel free to ask me or ask your rep, and we can go over it with you. So let's look at a couple case studies, okay? So car came in, used the EPR cleaner, the MOA, the 44K, right? So what happened? So this is a Honda, right? And they saw a 31 horsepower increase and almost 40 foot-pounds of torque from an oil change service. This is why they are going to notice the way the car runs better. And also that 20 pounds of compression in the engine is a lot, right? That's a lot to be able to be restored from doing an oil change service, right? This is the reason it helps with oil consumption, because now the compression rings are able to seat properly, the compression goes up, we clean everything out, and then all of a sudden you're going down the right path, okay? The other thing I want you to notice here that I think is really cool is look at the first yellow bar is after the oil change. Then it's after the 44K. So you're looking at a 5 PSI compression increase between just the 44K and the tank. What that's doing is cleaning the top of the piston and making it seal better. That's the strength of 44K. And again, if you look right here in the middle, this is a 2019 Honda CR-V with 39,000 miles on it. 39,000 miles, and it already lost 40 pounds of compression, or 40 pounds of torque, and almost 40 horsepower. That's incredible. And remember, we're restoring it, right, to original. All right, so here's the hybrid Prius service or the stop-start engine service. So they did 2 Priuses over about 20,000 miles, and they saw 11.68 mile per gallon increase. Okay. Oh, I'm sorry. Now, what I want you to look at on this one is the 38 to the 46 was really the EPR and the MOA. Then that 47 is because the 44K was in the tank, and that's what kept cleaning, and then it produced a better mile per gallon. What I like about this service, especially with hybrid owners, a lot of them want better gas mileage. You can guarantee them that this is going to give them better gas mileage. We have the proof, we have the research. I will guarantee you that it'll make the car run better and they will be super happy with this service. Diesel, okay? So this is a diesel truck, right? We did the EPR, the DOC, and then the PD15, the diesel fuel cleaner, and they had an astonishing 70 foot-pounds of torque increase, 70 foot-pounds of torque, and in one cylinder, a 40 PSI increase in compression. Incredible. And these are all pour-ins, right? Because we want to make it a quick service, be able to do it quickly, get it in, get it out, and get them the stuff that they need to make their car last till the wheels fall off, like they told us, okay? So when we're building out the oil change, we're going to do an oil change. We're going to do the premium filter, okay? What I want you to think about is the total price of the customer. I want you to consider making it a price that you don't have to change. People hate paying an extra $4 or whatever the case may be. Trust me, on the one that takes 1 or 2 more quarts, you're going to win on the one that only takes 3 quarts. It'll balance out at the end of the month. Don't worry about charging them for tons of extra quarts, okay? Figure out a price that you can do, and it's going to cover that, okay? So that you can advertise that price and they get in and get out for that price. When you start the relationship that way, when you need a bigger service, they trust you on the price. They're not worrying about if it's going to be more, right? Because you did what you told them you're going to do. They'll go, oh my God, there's not another thing. It's because they're used to seeing that in every other shop, right? Oh, there's some fee and there's this and there's that, whatever, right? No, here's your price. Have a nice day. Again, with the fees, make sure that is a part of the price. So if your coupon says 109, it better be 109 on the bill, is all I'm saying. This drives people crazy, including me. Make sure you include a tire rotation. It gives you a way to add $20 more of value to the job, and the car needs it. The customer that you want, again, is the customer that's going to want this. And then what intervals do you recommend? This is something we're going to talk about more in a little bit. And then lastly, what are the other items that you're going to do while the car's there? This is the stuff that I talk to them about, I advertise, and I tell them on the phone about what we're going to do. We're not just doing an oil change. We're doing what the car needs to get you the next 6,000 miles, right? If we do a bunch of Jiffy Lube oil changes, those tires are going to have issues because they were never rotated, right? So that's one of those things, okay? Now, before you collect the keys, you need to make sure that this has all been explained to them, including the inspection. Whether it's at the counter or on the phone, it needs to be very clear to them what is going to be done. So when you call them, they're not surprised, okay? So as we're thinking about this, remember, how long is it going to be until we see them again should dictate what we look at and how many miles are on the vehicle, okay? So how do we make that happen? The best way is to talk to your team and get them on board. Now, I know that's easier said than done, but what I would recommend is sitting them down and saying, look, we're going to start doing this. I'd rather have your guys' input than not. So let's sit down and go over this together about what we're going to inspect, what you're not going to inspect. A lot of shops don't pull spark plugs. I wouldn't either, right? We can recommend it by mileage. So figure out what you're going to do and then make an inspection, okay? So set a standard as a team. Here's the other thing. If you let them have input, they're going to feel like they were a part of the decision. And if they don't do it, they're affecting the whole team, not just you, okay? So set a standard as a team and they'll all do it. Belts is a good example. So I remember a lot of, when I worked in Euro, we would recommend at 75,000 miles a belt. And no matter what, because if not, by 80, they'd break and they'd need a tensioner and get towed in, right? And my brother worked at Mercedes and did the same thing. But if that belt is going to go another 75,000 miles without an issue, is that tensioner going to make it? No, right? So that's why we recommend it. Now, look, if you're worried about that for some reason, recommend both. Tell them both options. I got 2 options for you on the belt. If you really plan on keeping the car, I would go with this option. It's going to save you a breakdown. It's going to save you money. Or we could just do the belt. It's up to you. It's their car, but let them make the decision. Next, when are you recommending brakes, right? What is the rule that we're going to recommend, okay? Remember, cars are going 6,000 miles between intervals now, not 3. So this stuff has to get changed. Don't use the word 30 seconds or millimeters. Customers have no idea what you're talking about. I don't care if you're talking about pennies and all these stupid things I've heard. Break it down into a percentage. Hey, you have 20% left on your brakes. At this point, you're not going to make it 6 months to your next visit. That's why I'd recommend getting it done today. Oh, Peyton, I'm broke. I just can't do it today. Well, look, you can do it in 2 weeks. You're just not going to make it 6 months. Oh, right? That's honest. We measured it. It's truthful. We're helping the customer make the best decision for what they need. Okay. So again, it won't make it 6 months. That's the qualifier for brakes. Brake fluid service, right? Are you testing it? What are you doing instead of just guessing and saying it needs a brake flush, right? Batteries. This is the tester that I use. It's a Medtronic tester. Very quick. Can do the battery and the charging system under 30 seconds. And you can get every one because they're not crazy expensive. And then all of a sudden you're testing batteries and you'll notice you'll stop getting tow-ins for dead batteries or calls for it because you're testing them when they come in. This is what your customer wants. Okay, next, explain this to your customer. One of the best things to do is include it in all of your marketing, okay? So if you have a mailer or a coupon or an email or whatever you're doing or a thing on the wall, right? Make sure it goes over what is going to be done with that customer, right? So what you want to do is explain to the customer what you're doing and why. I'm doing this so you don't have a breakdown over the next 6 months. Whether you decide to fix it or not is entirely up to you. But my job is to let you know what I see. Here's our inspection form that our guy is going to fill out to make sure that we don't miss something, right? And then I will go over this with you. A lot of times we are doing it now digitally and it's getting sent to them, but we need to make sure, this is the hardest thing as a manager, to make sure that these are getting done 100% on every single car, every single time. I call this ticket audits. I actually would go through as a district manager and look through them and see if they were done right. I don't need you to sell everything on it, but it's our responsibility to make sure that they know about it, right? If we see something, they asked you, they trust you to look at the car, you got to let them know. Let them make the decision. It's their car, okay? And then lastly, we're sending them an estimate based on our inspection, because we're not guessing, we're looking at it and having a plan, and then we can send it to them. It's so easy with some of the systems now. You can literally pay through a phone and approve on a phone, and it's kind of changing the whole thing. But you still have to have a plan. Where most people screw this up is they go digital. They never sit down with their team. They never really build a plan to get all this done every time and set up the system properly. And they never really get to the customers really seeing it and understanding it and believing in it, because customers will start asking for it if you don't send it to them because they want to see it, right? So let me kind of show you how I break this out in pricing to make it the right option. You want to make it easy for them to say yes. When you guys go into a place and you see a plan on the wall and you're like, man, that was easy. Trust me, that was set up, right? They're doing it in a certain way to help you make a smart decision, okay? So first oil change, if you still want to offer an oil change without MOA, that's okay. I recommend it as a 3,000 mile interval only, okay? That's how I have that compromise with the customer. If it's 6,000 miles, it's going to get MOA, and then I don't have to worry about it. And if they're a little bit late on the oil change, I don't have to worry about it. But we all know that if I go 6,000 miles, it's going to lose oil. It might have an oil light come in. Your customer doesn't want that, okay? And then an oil service. I would love to see every shop sell this on every vehicle every single time, but this is definitely for oil consumption and other issues. And if you're struggling to sell it, what I would recommend is trying to sell it at least once a year to the car. So the cleaner, the MOA, and the 44K is going to take care of a lot of issues, and then do the MOA on all the other oil changes, and you should be good to go, okay? If they want more protection with the protection plan, we can talk to you about that. But the EPR cleaner should definitely be used on cars that you know have oil consumption issues, right? Your Chevy Cruzes, right? Your Kias, right? Use this stuff, or at least recommend it to them. We know that these things have oil consumption issues. You've lost oil in the past. You should really do the EPR oil change every single time, and then you're not going to have a problem, okay? So when you price this out, these are just examples. Let's say that the oil change for 6,000 miles with MOA is $119, and the 3,000 mile one, I make it $20 cheaper. to make the 6,000 mile one easy. It's not just about the cost of the oil and the filter. Think about your time and the inspection and everything else, right? So, hi, Mr. Customer, you need an oil change today. Do you go 3,000 miles or 6,000 miles? Oh, I go 6,000 miles. Well, great. Our oil change for 6,000 miles is $119. It includes a tire rotation, a full inspection, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. When would you like to drop it off? Okay. Then this package usually comes out to about $149. Have you been consuming oil? Yes, I have. Okay, let's start with this and let's fill it to the proper level, and then let's see how much oil you lose. And then again, the 1 year service would be about $179 to $200, depending on how you price it. Okay, this would include a whole inspection. So again, questions that I've seen work very well. Is your car losing any oil? You could ask this to every customer, and 9 out of 10 are going to say yes, because with all the GDI engines and 6,000 mile intervals on standard oil, you're just base synthetic, basically, right? Just regular synthetic oil that's approved for the car. It's still going to sludge up. So they're still going to consume oil. They all have these problems now. Are you late with your oil change? That's another great question. If you notice that they're late, then they can spend a couple extra bucks and get it cleaned out properly so it doesn't cause a bigger issue down the road, okay? Also, have you done a 1 year service, right? Today, I'd recommend a 1 year service because we haven't done it. We're gonna check your air filters, check all this stuff, and the base price for that is $179. It includes an oil change with an oil cleaner and a fuel additive. It's your annual fuel additive. Don't worry about buying any from Costco or wherever else. We got you covered, okay? And then lastly, again, what is the plan for this vehicle? What is the plan for this vehicle? If you ask them that, they'll tell you, and it makes it easier for you to approach them about this stuff. You're not selling them something they don't need. All of these cars need this stuff. The problem is that a lot of people don't know. You've got to educate your customer. Now, with higher mileage, I hear this a lot, right? Oh, I got to get higher mileage oil. This was a big marketing campaign, in my opinion. The oil, I've tested it against regular, and it fails at the exact same rate as the regular oil does, which tells me that it has the same amount of detergents in it, roughly, maybe a little bit more, okay? But if you look at the back of the bottle, it tells you all the things that it fights against. And basically, it is more additive, right? It's more of the good stuff, but the question is really how much. It's not as much as you would think. What I would recommend is using MOA instead of a higher mileage oil. You're going to have a much better result because the amount of additive that's in MOA is way more than the amount of oil that comes, or additive that comes with the high mileage oil, okay? So any cars that are higher mileage, say 75,000 miles, but I have a car with 200,000 miles on it, doesn't smoke, right? So if it's like that and it doesn't really have any issues, use the MOA and just keep going. Mild lifter issues, mild smoking, you can start with this. If it's an engine that you know is older, has had smoking issues, maybe some blow by, low compression, lifter oil, lifter noise, RF7 is our treatment for that. What that does is keeps the viscosity at the same amount that it's supposed to be so that it can increase compression and it fights acid buildup very, 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 very well. So if you have an older engine that needs a little bit of TLC, this is the product that you would want to use for that. Okay. So, and then there's a kind of a picture of a cap of how much oil additive comes in one of those jugs compared to a can of MOA. Right? So it's a lot more. So a couple things to remember. What is the plan for this vehicle? It's a great question to start asking your customers. I'd even ask them on the phone, especially if it's a complicated issue. Well, hey, what's the plan of this vehicle? I need to get rid of the thing, or whatever. Like, kind of figure out where their head is with the vehicle, what they want to do with it, okay? Next, build packages in your system that are easy, quick clicks, make it simple. If you need help, please let me know. I can help you with that stuff, but make it simple for your staff to just add that service. They can explain to the customer, and you can start making money on oil changes and giving the customer what they want, okay? Tell the customer about your experience. If you haven't used one of these products, please let us know. We'll do a demo on your vehicle. I want you to feel it so that you can tell a customer this stuff does work. It's not just a thing that they sell, right? This is a real service. It's real chemicals. It's real power. It's real proven results. And then set the process with your team and explain it to the customer, okay? So, hey, when the car goes back there, we're not just changing the oil. we're going to change the oil, we're going to check this, we're going to do that, we're going to do this, we're going to do that. When you can have the confidence with a checkoff system that you know those items get checked, it makes you really strong with the customer to be able to say, hey, look, I even saw it on the car, it needs this, this, and this. It's not in bad shape, but it does need some things. But if you don't do a proper inspection on the vehicle, how can you really tell them it's worth keeping, right? So something to think about. Thank you so much for spending time with me today. I will get this recording processed and I will send it all out to you. Let's see if we have any questions.